I have a mother-in-law who's the true definition of a freeloader. You're not going to believe some of the wild things she's been up to. Well, one day, when I go back to my house, I'm expecting to see my husband and my mother-in-law as usual. But when I get there, I see a man covered in tattoos, completely head to toe, and he has these big rings in his ears. So obviously, I ask him who the heck is he before I'm about to call the cops. And my mother-in-law stops me and says, "Don't mess with him. That's my new lover, and he's going to be staying here." Did I mention the fact that he is addicted? I'm an orphan who has enough to live by for the remaining parts of my life. My late parents had left me a few properties, which is quite valuable. My emphasis is not on my life, but on my mother-in-law. My husband's name is Josh, and we were both 24 years old. We both had the mindset of starting early in life, so we decided to get married just 2 months after we met. And he took me to meet his parents. I was very well received during my visit to Josh's place. It was as though his parents were trying to outdo each other in showing hospitality. I initially felt that this was sweet because it showed the couple believed in being hospitable, something I saw as a sign that my in-laws would not cause headaches for me after getting married to their son. They listened with enthusiasm as Josh and I spoke. I was barely done when his mother introduced herself as an event planner and suggested that she would love to plan our wedding. I was about to state how awesome it was going to be to have my mother-in-law plan my wedding when her husband scoffed and said it would be the worst mistake I would have made in my entire life. I was surprised to hear him talk in such a manner about his wife to someone whom he was meeting for the first time. His wife looked at him and challenged him for trying to tarnish her image, but he did not mind. He just went on advising me to consider committing the best day of my life to his wife. I tried dousing the tension that had already filled the atmosphere by stating that I would be honored to have my would-be mother-in-law plan my wedding, but my father-in-law still noted that she would charge me exorbitantly but still deliver something of inferior quality. Josh asked his dad to let the whole thing slide, and that's when his father kept quiet. The visit to my in-laws' place and the drama which had ensued showed that my fiancé's parents' marriage was far from inviolable. I was very curious to know more about it, and I turned to Josh for answers. Josh said his father was not his father. His mother, who was 42, had gotten pregnant with him, and she was 18 years old at the time. It was when he was 3 years old that she crossed paths with his dad, and he married her despite knowing she already had a kid. Well, that is Josh's account. From what I know now, I believe my father-in-law must have been manipulated by Josh's mother, because that's who she is, a freeloader who loves manipulating and using people without giving it a second thought. Josh called me 3 days after I had received his family home, and he asked that we meet urgently, so I suggested he comes to my house. Josh came looking gloomy. I was scared and pressed to know what the issue was, and he said that we could not get married. My fear was further heightened by his statement, as I thought he was breaking up with me, so I asked what I had done. He then rephrased his speech by saying that we had to put the marriage on pause because his parents were getting a divorce. I was honestly surprised by the news. From his explanation, Josh said that things had gotten out of hand after my visit to his family. His mother took up the issue with his dad, and they had a serious argument. They could have gotten physical if not for the fact that his dad tried his best to hold himself back. It was after then that his dad decided he's better off alone, and his mom agreed. I perfectly understood the situation of things. It was going to be very insensitive of us to be organizing a wedding when his parents were planning a divorce. So, my in-laws had the divorce, and my father-in-law had to move out of the house, and he even bought it with his own money, because it was given to his now ex-wife after the divorce was finalized. I asked Josh to move in with me since we were going to live together after marriage. We went to check up on his mother shortly after the divorce, and while we were at it, she asked for an update on the wedding. I told her that we've decided to put it on pause as we felt it was somewhat insensitive to go ahead with our wedding when they had just gone through a divorce. "Nonsense," my mother-in-law exclaimed. She said that though she was hurt, it was a means of escape for her and a path towards healing. Josh and I then asked her to do her evaluation and give us an estimate of what it would cost us. So my mother-in-law immediately told us that she's done all that and had figured the right amount right then and there, and what she gave us was absolutely ridiculous. She did not give us a list that contained the breakdown of how the money was going to be spent. She just gave us a figure and tried convincing us that it was in our best interest if we wanted to get a nice wedding. So, obviously, I asked her to reevaluate things and give us a figure that could give us a moderate wedding ceremony, and she said that she claimed the figure she had already given us was moderate enough. I began having second thoughts about working with her, or if we should hire someone else, but Josh reminded me that one of the reasons it was going to be ideal to work with his mom was because she needed a distraction. I finally agreed with what he said, and I was the one who gave his mother the money for the wedding. The wedding day arrived, and it dawned on me that I had made the worst decision of my life. The mistake I'm talking about is not my choice of partner, but my choice of event planner. Everything was a mess, and even the guests noted that whoever had planned my wedding had done a terrible job. From the choice of venue down to the organization, it was bad. I'd given money to have a live band play at my reception, but my mother-in-law hired a disc jockey just to do it, and I would not be too offended if he had done a great job. It was clear from the get-go that the DJ was not well-versed in the profession. I could see my father-in-law among the crowd, and the more he looked at me, the more I was reminded of the mistake that I've made. The wedding was over, but most of the guests had already left before then. Josh and I went home and expressed my disappointment at how his mother handled the whole thing. I noted that the only reason I did not confront her at the wedding venue was that I did not want to create a scene on my wedding day. Josh calmed me down by saying the important thing was that we were now married. I did not confront my mother-in-law anymore, but that action left an impression on me. Josh and I left for our honeymoon, and we spent 2 weeks. We returned to begin our life of bliss only to have his mother show up. She noted that she had 2 important things to tell us. One, according to her, was good news, while the other was a request. We anticipated the good news, and though it was good, it was equally shocking. My mother-in-law was pregnant. Yep, she is 42 and has been a divorced woman for up to 3 months. This was another pointer that she was largely, if not solely, responsible for her collapsed marriage. Her path to recovery led her to pregnancy. I'm not one to judge, so I actually went out to congratulate her. She then told Josh and me that her request was based on her pregnancy status, and we asked what it was. She asked to move in with us. We asked about her home because she had a mansion all to herself, and she informed us that she had recently sold it. How could she sell her house only to start begging for accommodations? Well, if she sold it, then it meant she had money to buy another, or at least rent an apartment for herself. My mother-in-law knew that, the thought which was going through my mind, and she said that she had sold the house because it reminded her of her painful memories. Well, that was understandable. My mother-in-law then said that she did not want to move in on her own as she felt lonely, but she promised to not be a bother to us and would move out once her child was born. Without seeking my consent, Josh told her it's fine. I later confronted him on why he overlooked me and made such a drastic decision without seeking my opinion. He apologized and noted that he had felt responsible for his younger brother, who was on the way coming. Another reason I felt Josh had been too hasty in making him decide that if his mother felt lonely, then she could as well move in with the man who was responsible for her pregnancy. A man whom Josh should have asked her about before inviting her to come live with us. I'd say the issue of the man behind the pregnancy was not raised because I met him in a rather awkward way. My mother-in-law moved in with us, and she did not keep to her promise of not being to bother us. Her pregnancy was barely 2 weeks long, but she used it to do nothing. She soon made a habit of calling my attention to get grapes, drinks, milk, and other things in the fridge which was finished, and she was the one who had eaten a large chunk of it. For somebody who sold her house, I expected her to contribute financially, but she would rather have me go to the grocery store 3 times a week with my own money. I did my best to not complain, even though it was clear my mother-in-law was seriously taking advantage of my hospitality, but she just kept on stretching my limits, and I got home one day from work and I could hear some gangstar music coming from the inside. Well, Josh was supposed to be back from work, and I knew it was either he or his mother who played the music, but why would they do so? It wasn't their kind of genre. So I knocked on the door, and it took a while before someone heard my banging at the door. With the volume of the noise coming from the house, it was a surprise that the neighbors had not called the cops. The door swung open, but it was neither my husband nor his mother. It was a skinny man in his late 40s. He had rings all over his face, and his skin was covered in tattoos. He smiled and said I must be his daughter-in-law, and I could see that every one of his teeth were colored in every color but white. I ignored the smell of alcohol on his breath and asked who he was and what he was doing in my home. I did not wait for his reply before brushing past him inside. My house was a mess, and my mother-in-law was pregnant, and she sat on the couch with a bottle of beer in her hand, and the empty bottles which laid beside her showed that they've been drinking before I came. My mother-in-law introduced the man as her lover, who was responsible for her pregnancy. His name was Sean, and my mother-in-law noted that he had come to check up on her after a few days. I was baffled for several reasons. My mother-in-law, who I barely was putting up with, invited her lover to not just come visit her, but to spend a few days without my consent. How did she even end up with such a junkie? Sean stretched out his hand and said he was pleased to meet me, but I did not give him the handshake. I asked my mother-in-law if Josh had returned from work, and she said that he was sleeping in his room. So I walked straight to Josh and woke him up. I questioned why he would not show any form of concern that a junkie's in our house. He said Sean had showed up surprisingly at our home, and he welcomed the idea of Sean staying for a few days. Not just because his mother wanted it, but because it would afford him the opportunity to get to know his mother's lover a bit better. What more was there to know about the guy? He's a junkie, for crying out loud. I did not hide the fact that I was uncomfortable with Sean in my house, but my husband pleaded that I just be patient since he would not be around for long. The past couple of days have been the worst of my life. Sean's still in my house and he refuses to leave. His presence just irritates the life out of me, and I don't know how long I can put up with it. He's not just useless, but equally irresponsible. As somebody who was expecting a child, he was unprepared and did not care. The only thing he did at home was lazy about and feed live off my resources. His lover, my mother-in-law, has inculcated the entitlement mentality into him, and we fell out because of that 3 days ago. I was leaving for work that morning because my husband already left the house, and that's when my mother-in-law, that's when her lover stepped to me to tell me that the milk and some other stuff was finished, and these were things which my mother-in-law loved taking during the pregnancy. He asked that I ensure I did not forget to stop by the grocery store on my way back. I was running late, but the moment I heard those words coming out of his mouth, I decided I would not leave the house that day without giving Sean a piece of my mind. So I told him straight away that he was mad and out to be ashamed of himself for trying to pass on his responsibility to me. I can't remember the exact words which I said that day, but it was a lot. My tone was harsh, so harsh in fact that my mother-in-law rushed the scene and began asking what happened. I was not willing or ready to explain because it would make no difference, so I immediately asked her to get her lover out of my house before I returned. I was at work when my husband began calling me. I refused to pick up his call because I knew his mother must have updated him on what happened, and he was probably calling to have me look over, once again. He showed up at my workplace during my lunch hour after failing to get my attention. We briefly sat down to talk, and he was the one doing most of the talking because I was not in the mood. Josh began saying his mother had called him over the phone and was crying that I disrespected her lover. My initial intention was to just snub my husband, but hearing what his mother said seemed to stir up the anger that was already boiling inside of me. I told him that if his mother's lover had respected himself and left our home, then what his mother was calling disrespectful would never have happened in the first place. I rehearsed what had happened before my husband and I insisted that I did not want his mother's lover in my home. Besides, since his mother has initially proposed staying at our house based on companionship, she could now rent a house or buy one and live with her lover. She had the money, after all. So, my husband actually continued to defend his mom and her lover. He claimed that he was on the verge of securing a job for his mother's lover, and Sean should be out of our house within a week or two. From where I stand, I can confidently say that no sane employer would give Sean a job. Sean was not even ready to work. I let the whole thing go, but I made my stance known to my husband. If his mother's lover should step on my toes before he leaves my house, I will disrespect him. Update number 1. Sean's currently being detained at the police station, courtesy of me. It did not take him long to step on my toes, and I reacted as promised. I had returned from work 2 days ago and discovered that the Sean essence that filled the atmosphere of my home was missing. I did not bother asking where he went because I simply did not care. The next day was a weekend and my husband was out on a company field trip, but his mom and I were at home, and that was when her lover showed up. I knew he was the one, so I did not waste my time going to answer the door when it rang. My mother-in-law was the one who stood up and went to usher him in. I was seated on the couch and he greeted me like he was greeting one of his guys. I did not respond, but my eyes caught the gold pendant which was on his neck. It looked exactly like the ones which my late parent had left for me. I'd not seen it for some days, but I felt it was probably somewhere in my room, and I would discover it with time, so you can imagine my shock when I saw it on Sean's neck. I did not say anything, I just stood up and went to my room to confirm it. What he had on his neck was the heirloom I inherited from my parents. I knew it was mine, but the reason I wanted confirmation was because I would overreact, so I needed to be sure. After I was satisfied the heirloom was mine, I went to the parlor where Sean and my mother-in-law were both seated and asked Sean what my necklace was doing on his neck. He lazily said he wanted to go out and felt the necklace would look good on him. He even noted that it was real gold. It was the guts for me, the audacity. Did I not know it was real gold? What gave him the right in the first place to walk into my room, go through my stuff, and take it? If he could walk into my room at will, then it simply meant that I had zero privacy in my own home, and I could not take it. I'd promised to show him what disrespect was, and that was exactly what I did. I went straight to his room, brought out his stuff, and threw it outside before ordering him to leave my home. Both Sean and my mother-in-law were shocked, and she asked me if I was out of my mind. She said that I was disrespecting her lover and she would not take it. How biased can people be? Did she not see my gold heirloom around his neck? She did not bother asking how he had gotten it, but her focus was on the fact that I disrespected her boyfriend. So, I responded by telling her that if she felt that, the need for she and her boyfriend were being disrespected, then she could pack up her crap and leave too. My mother-in-law said that he was not going anywhere, not when her son had not said so, and I did not argue. I simply picked up the phone and called the cops. The cops arrived and I finally accused Sean of theft. My gold pendant was still on his neck, so he could not deny it. Sean was immediately handcuffed by the cops and detained him at the station. My mother-in-law has called her son, who was on his way back home. Well, he would not say I did not warn them of what would happen if I was disrespected by Sean. Update number 2. I had to remind Josh recently that he got married to me and not his mother, because the mother-son bond that they shared had beclouded his sense of judgment. Josh came back home and he picked up a fight with me for locking up his mother's lover. So, I told him about how my privacy was violated by the said lover, and that the unapologetic manner with which he said he took it, and rather than see my reason, Josh teamed up with his mom against me. He said that no matter what his mother's lover had done, I had no right to treat him like a criminal, and by doing so I had disrespected not just Sean but equally him and his mom. Well, to start with, I had treated Sean like a criminal because that's just what he is. Secondly, he had it coming a long time ago because I've been sounding the warning. My husband immediately asked me to go to the police station and drop the case against his mother's lover, but I refused. This was the very first time I was denying my husband's request, and his mother began saying that all of this started simply because she decided to temporarily stay at her son's place. The more she spoke, the angrier I became, because she just painted me as a terrible person. I walked out of there, and my husband began keeping malice with me. There was tension in my home, and this is thanks to his mother's presence, and she had ruined her marriage, and now she was trying to ruin mine. I planned on letting the whole drama drag for as long as possible, but I discovered that I was 2 weeks pregnant. This was the best thing that had happened to me in a long time, and I felt it would ease things up between my husband and me, but I was wrong. The reaction I had from Josh, more me, more the unpleasant experiences his mother had been making me get. I got back from work very early yesterday and I stopped by the grocery store to pick up a few items which I would use in making his favorite dish. I took my time to prepare the whole thing, took a bath, and got dressed in a nightgown with nothing beneath. The idea was that I was going to break the malice, serve him a meal, and then break the news of my pregnancy to him while he was about to have his bath. This was my recipe for getting things fiery between us. Josh did not touch his food and he just went ahead to take his bath. I was not discouraged, though, as I felt he would loosen up once he heard the news of my pregnancy. He was still undressing to get into the bathroom when I told him that I was pregnant. Josh did not blink an eye or halt whatever he was doing. He just walked straight into the bathroom and wanted to have his bath, but I went in after him. I asked if he did not just hear what I said. He replied by asking if I expected him to share in my happiness when his pregnant mother's lover was being detained because of me. I felt bad at my husband's reply, and I'm willing for the sake of our unborn child to drop the charges against Sean. I'm even willing to tolerate his mother staying in the house till when she's ready to leave. Update number 3. I know my last update was about me trying to save my marriage and all, but things have changed. I want to end it dramatically. After I saw Josh was not excited about my pregnancy, I prepared to go down to the station the next day and officially drop the theft charge against Sean. But he would have to stay away from me and my husband, of course. I told Josh that morning what I intended doing, and he said nothing till I was all dressed up and ready to leave the house. He then asked that I drive Sean home before going to the office. Having Sean back at my house was not something I had in mind, but I was willing to pay the price. I did not say a word to Sean, who did not bother to apologize for my privacy intrusion. He almost deafened my ears with complaints of how I disrespected him. I kept quiet and endured both his irritating attitude and the disgusting smell coming from him. If not for the fact that I was trying to make peace, I would have thrown him out of my car without hesitation. I dropped him off in front of my house and drove down to work. It took me a great deal of effort to swallow my pride and do what I had done, but my husband was not pleased. I got home and Josh demanded that I apologize to his mother and her lover for disrespecting them. This was like asking me to take my own life. If anybody was owed any form of apology amongst them, it was me, but Josh was more interested in pleasing his mom than seeing justice be upheld. I went ahead to give the apology and everything went great. I knew staying in the same house with my mother-in-law and her junkie boyfriend was going to be almost impossible, so I had already applied for leave from my company and was preparing a 2-week getaway vacation for my husband and me. The idea was us to bond together and, more importantly, spend a little time, as possible, at home. It's funny how I'm now avoiding my own house. The vacation was paid for and it cost me a lot. I was preparing to tell Josh about it when his mother came up with a request. She asked that I hire a maid to help around the house, as she could not be doing certain things for herself. I get the fact that she's pregnant and needs help, but her husband was at home doing nothing. What was the point of hiring a maid when the man who had gotten her pregnant was well and able to care for her? Besides, if she wanted one, she could do with her own money. I told her I could not foot the bill, and she quickly informed her son. Josh turned his mother's request into a demand, and even when I told him I could not employ someone, he suddenly suggested I sell one of the properties, one of my other houses, that my parents left me just to foot his mother's pregnancy demand. It is the height of it for me. I've realized that Josh's mother would always come between him and I, so I would be going on vacation alone, and I plan on ending my marriage once I get back. Final update. This update will not be lengthy, as I just want to announce to you that I'm divorced from my husband. After Josh had demanded that I sell the other house that my parents left me, I decided to play along. You must have heard me refer to the house which my husband and I lived in as a house of my own. Well, it's not far from the truth. My parents have left and passed it on to me together with the other house which my husband wanted me to sell. So I lied to Josh that I was going for a 2-week company trip but would sell the property which he had suggested. I didn't stop there. I asked both him and his mom to look for a house help, just to start immediately, and I was going to be the one paying. My mother-in-law was so happy that she manipulated situations in her favor, but it was all part of my scheme. I suggested to Josh to secure a loan for Sean and promised to repay the loan once I got back from the company trip, since I would sell the other house afterward. My actions made everyone think I wanted to mend the fence between Sean and me. So, Josh wanted me to come back from my trip and secure the loan myself, as he wanted me to use the house we lived in as collateral, since it was registered under my name. But his mother, who had heard the money talk, would not want to wait till I returned because of her greed and burning desire to use people, so she suggested that he uses his vehicle as collateral instead. Josh would always dance to his mother's tune, so he agreed. I went on vacation alone, and Josh noted I was going with too many bags. What he did not know was that I was never coming back to live in this house. I was on vacation when the agent whom I've contacted was able to secure a buyer, who agreed to buy the house for a very cheap price after he saw some pictures. After 2 weeks was up, I went to see my husband and his mother and her lover. I did not go alone. I went with the new owner of the house and the divorce papers, which I had used part of the money, and set it up. The maid whom they had employed was the one who opened the door, and Josh was surprised I did not have any bags with me. I told him I was coming back to the marriage never, and I handed over divorce papers to him. He was stunned. His mother noted that I could divorce him for all she cared, but her son was keeping the home. Well, I introduced them to the new owner of the house, who asked them to leave before the week was up. I then asked Josh to get ready to lose his car because I would not repay any loan or pay any maid. I walked out, leaving him in debt. We finalized our divorce last week, and his mother, who refused to leave his side all this while, was nowhere to be seen. From what I've heard, she's rented a house, but her lover has jilted her. Good for everyone, I suppose. Honestly, I've seen enough of these type of stories. I knew exactly where this was heading because OP's significant other was a mama's boy. We've seen it before. Anybody that's been part of the channel for a while has seen their share of mama boys. And well, they're complete floor mats, and they usually end up self-destructing their own relationship because they can't separate their feelings from their mom and their lover. This is the prime example of the story that we saw today. I want to know your thoughts on it, and there was a couple comments I noticed that said OP put up with this for far too long. The second that this strange man was in her house, she should have pulled the plug when her husband was allowing him to stay. So I do want to know your thoughts on that. This was a wild story. So let's discuss every part of it in the comment section down below. Guys, my name's Mr. Reddito. This is Mr. Reddito's story channel, and if you guys want to see my revenge channel or my animated channel, go ahead, check the description down below where I post daily stories on both channels. Alright guys, have a great day, I'll see you tomorrow, and of course remember, it's cool to be kind. See ya.